honored to serve as the 64th president of the eBell of Los Angeles. Founded in 1894 by a handful of women to educate and empower women. Today, our mission has evolved to be a women-led, women-focused arts and cultural campus that serves all of Los Angeles. We are delighted to partner with the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall to present this important series of conversations with candidates for the office of mayor to lead our great city. My thanks to our executive director, Stacy Brightman, for forging this partnership, one of many we hope to undertake to realize our vision of providing education, arts, and cultural programming in our historic campus that serves the entire Los Angeles community. On behalf of Stacy, our staff, my fellow volunteer board members, and the community of eBell women, always open to new members, I welcome you to the eBell. And it's my pleasure to introduce Kim McCleary, President of the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall, to get us started.
Welcome to the 2022 LA Mayoral Series kickoff. You're all here and you braved the rain. This is wonderful. Well, becoming mayor of Los Angeles is an enormous job. It's the second largest city in the United States, and with all of the current challenges, we know that we really need to have tonight's program. We need ideas. I'm sure you both are going to fill us up with great ideas. So we would like to let you know that, I need to do my own plug for my own organization. So we plan this series to inform and inspire the residents of Los Angeles to engage in civic conversations just like this, because this is our future. So I want to thank just a couple partners. This beautiful eBell Los Angeles. Isn't this gorgeous? Please give a hand. We're going to have many more venues here, events here. I'd also like to thank, we have some tremendous promotional partners. We have the Pepperdine School of Public Policy, UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs, Hispanis Organized for Political Equality, and the Los Angeles Urban League. Now, the best part. Tonight, we meet mayoral candidate Joe Buscaino, who represents LA's 15th Council District. He serves as chair of the city's Trade, Travel, and Tourism Committee, and also works on committees for issues such as the 2028 Olympics, homelessness, poverty, and transportation. Moderating tonight is our 2022 LA Mayoral Series host, Dan Schnur. Dan is a political professor at USC, Pepperdine, and also, which one did I forget, Dan? UC Berkeley, and Pepperdine. And earlier in his career, you will be fascinated to know, Dan worked on 4 presidential campaigns and 3 gubernatorial campaigns as one, if not California's leading political strategist. So with that, Dan, I better turn it over to you.
So thank you. Thank you very much, Kim. And thanks all of you for joining us here tonight. I'm really thrilled to be part of this series, and especially excited that our esteemed guest, Councilmember Joe Buscaino, can be our first guest for what I know is going to be a very interesting and very impactful series of conversations between now and the primary in June. One of the things that I learned in the years that I was working on campaigns is that when you really learn about a candidate, when you really learn about what motivates them, what drives them, and what they're going to prioritize when they get to office, the best time to learn that isn't the day or the week before the election. Right. It's early on in the campaign. And I'm so excited to see all of you here really as the first concentric circle of this conversation. And because over the next 4 months, these conversations in these circles are going to continue to grow outward. But being here early on to hear the campaigns before the home stretch, that's when you really get to know the men and women who are seeking this really important office. And as I said earlier, we couldn't be more thrilled than to have as our first guest, Councilmember Joe Buscaino. I too want to thank our friends at the eBell for hosting us, not just tonight, but through the series. And I want to thank not just Kim McCleary, but her incredible, amazing team at the LA World Affairs Council Town Hall, to thank Michelle Stoll and Hare Krelitz and Rachel Kenderheim and the entire team who puts on these programs both in person and online over the course of the year. So if you'll indulge me for just a moment and join me in giving them a round of applause, because they do terrific work. So Joe, in just a couple of minutes, I want to talk to you about your time on the City Council, what you've learned, what you've prioritized, what you'd like to share with our audience. But frankly, I'd like to start a little bit before that, because of course you have an entire career, an entire life that predated your election to office. As a leader in the Los Angeles Police Department, but as a member and a leader in our community for many, many years. So if we can go back to before you became a council member, before you became an elected official, I'm curious over the course of those previous years, what helped shape the way you think about our city? How did you develop an overview of the city of Los Angeles and come to decide that your direct involvement, not just as a civic and community leader, but as an elected official, could be of some benefit to our city? So where'd this all come from?
Thanks. Well, it started with my mom and dad who are here tonight, right in the front row. 53 years of marriage. And then I'm reminded, just growing up in Los Angeles, and mom and dad came here with nothing. They immigrated to the port. Dad was a fisherman, my mom worked the canneries. They come home smelling like fish, and they would say, that's the smell of money. That's what's going to put your sisters through college. That's what's going to pay the mortgage. Dad ended up spending 25 blessed years at the Carlos Bakery. And they instilled in my sisters and I, Dan, the importance of faith, having faith and trust in God, doing the right thing and abiding by the law, service to others, and of course family. And when we talk about, it seemed like in elementary school, I was always the first to raise my hand to volunteer after school, to the point where, 30 years of public service to the city. My first job was working at my local park that I grew up and where I learned how to play baseball at Bogdanovich Park as a recreation assistant going through college. And then, the opportunity where I was at this park, I was recruited to join the LAPD. And I went back to, what happened in 1992, the Watts Uprising. And as I was practicing baseball as a senior in high school, I looked north from San Pedro and I saw a city on fire. And I told myself, I want to be a police officer. Broke my heart then, just realizing as a 17-year-old the distrust between cops and the community. And then I joined the LAPD. But what I said in my oral interview at LAPD, they asked, why do you want to be a police officer? And I want to thank the officers who are here. Give them a round of applause. We love you. We thank you. The angels in the city of angels. The heart behind the badge of senior lead officers. I told the oral interview panel that I want to go back to my hometown and be a local police officer. And I did. And as a senior lead officer for 8 of the 15 blessed years, I was the local police officer in my own hometown. My wife was a teacher, raising our family in San Pedro. Our family has never left this place because we love it. And so going back to just my years of not only loving the city, but wanting to serve the city and understand the importance of giving back and really improving people's quality of life. And when Janice Hahn went off to Congress, I put my hat in the ring, and they told me then, how is a police officer going to get elected to city council? And just my involvement with the local youth development organizations, the neighborhood councils, neighborhood watch groups, business watch groups, being responsive to, the light that was out, the tree that needed to be trimmed, the pothole that needed to be filled, the gang graffiti that needed to be wiped away, the bad guys who were actually causing crime in the neighborhood. I was that guy. And it's turned me to the point where, as a council member, I felt that I can do more now. I can do more because, as we know, the chain of command, you have to get approval to get things done. So I figured, let me be at the top of the chain of command and affect change. And we're really proud, and that's what drove me to be on the city council.
So now, of course, if you do become the next mayor of Los Angeles, you're not just going to be the leader of an entire city, but of course the leader of a city government.
Yeah.
And so you've talked in very compelling terms about what you've learned about Los Angeles, given your work in the parks, given your work on the police department, given your work on the council. What have you learned about our city government and what needs to be done in order to allow it to serve the people of Los Angeles more effectively?
City government works so slow. And I got my team here. They know well. Now, I come at this at the lens of a first responder, right? An emergency, as for 15 blessed years, responding to a violent crime in progress, responding to a missing child, responding to a suicide in progress, lights and siren, full speed, handling crises. And over the 10 years, we're proud of what we've done with economic development, bringing investment to Watts down to the waterfront, in improving and embracing public service, helping the most needy among us. But I have found in 10 years that I'm tired of committee work. I'm tired of report backs. I'm tired of task forces while people are dying in our streets. And my team has heard me say this for 10 years, and they said, well, you know what? In order for you to fix this, you got to be the chief executive officer of the city. You got to be the mayor. And that's the mayor that I'm going to be. Leading with urgency, tackling problems like we've done in our district with urgency as if we're facing a crisis. And sure enough, if you look at our city today, we are in crisis mode based on what we see in our streets today. And I can tell you that when the bureaucracy doesn't work for the people, everyone suffers. Everyone suffers. And that is what I have learned. But I've found ways to overcome some of those obstacles by working with partnerships with the philanthropic community, by bringing tech and bringing innovation to my district. And I feel that I can do more. And I know I can do more. And that's why I want to leave the city.
So you mentioned in passing, and I want to come back to questions of public safety, because it appears at this point like the issues of crime and homelessness are going to dominate this mayoral campaign in a way that has not been the case for many, many years. Some of you may have joined us for the online program we did last month, where our friend Conan Nolan from KNBC and I discussed the mayor's race. And we took a look back at the mayoral campaign from 9 years ago, when Eric Garcetti and Wendy Gruhl faced off against each other. And we were struck by how different the conversation was then. So I do want to talk crime and public safety, but before I do, because this is something you've talked about to great and deserved attention during your career, one thing that maybe not as many voters know about is your commitment to green space and to parks. And so even before we get to those other more top of mind issues, talk a little bit about why issues that we tend to overlook like these are so important to you and should be so important to our city.
Well, especially preserving public spaces. Again, I go back to the park that I grew up in. My mom and dad taking me there as a kid, where it was free. We packed a lunch. We enjoyed ourselves. We had picnics, family picnics. We was able to play sports. And it was a clean and safe park. Been very blessed with that. And the opportunity, the experiences that I had growing up in San Pedro, every child should have in the city of Los Angeles. This is why we've expanded our green space, worked with our state and federal governments as it relates to bringing investment and grant dollars, bringing skate parks to areas where you rarely see a skate park, like Harbor City in Watts, in Wilmington, and being able to advance and build town squares. My parents are from Italy, Have you seen piazzas in Italy? That's kind of like the center point of a town, where you got art, culture, entertainment. And we've advanced on those programs from Watts all the way down to Wilmington and San Pedro. And we also need to make sure that I grew up in a park that was safe. And today, families are afraid to go into their own neighborhood park. And that's not the city that I know and love. And as mayor, I want to make sure that we expand our green spaces and make sure that they're clean and safe.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about safety, particularly on the issue of crime. It wasn't too long ago, barely a year and a half ago, where we saw massive rallies and protests throughout the city and throughout the country talking about the importance of police reform. And over the last many years, we've seen a greater emphasis at the local, state, and national level on remedial efforts, and sort of the tough on crime ethos that dominated in the 1980s and 90s seemed to have fallen out of favor. Now it seems like voters, and the LA Times reported on this morning, now it seems like voters are becoming more concerned and more upset, and in many cases more frightened about the prospect of violent crime and property crime alike. How do you walk that line between those who want to see a more traditional, tougher approach, but also understand the need for remediation and preventive approaches to keep these crimes from happening to begin
I
with?
appreciate that question. Listen, community-based policing has been in my DNA since day one. Why I take you back earlier in this conversation, you hear the echo? Is that me, guys? Is that me? Better? Fantastic. Why I wanted to join the LAPD is to go into my own hometown. I was a senior lead officer in my own basic car area. People thought I was crazy. They thought, you're going to arrest your best friends. I go, no, my best friends, they're good guys. They follow the law. But I wanted the neighborhood to know who to go to get help and to address a quality of life concern. And this is the LAPD that I know and love. Recognizing the fact that, remember, I joined in 1996, recognizing what took place in 92 with the second Watts uprising. And I was also a part of the reform with the consent decree, which I embraced at the time, because I told my partners then that the consent decree will make us the most professional police department in the country. And to this day, I truly believe that we are the largest reformed police department in the country. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. And there's a core value, quality through continuous improvement, that I've embraced. That we need more funding to make sure the officers have the best training in the country. We need more funding to make sure we have risk management systems in place, which we already do. And when I hear from, I was a National League of Cities president in 2020, representing 19,000 cities at the federal level. Council members from other parts of the city came to me and said, hey, what's this police commission that you have? The Civilian Oversight Commission. So what we saw in Minneapolis was a tragedy, a murder. Let me tell you something. LAPD is no Minneapolis Police Department. I can tell you, I was never trained in the academy to put my knee in someone's neck for nearly 10 minutes. We were never trained that. But we also recognize during the riots or the protests, the calls to defund the police, which I pushed back against. I voted no. I was one of two no votes, me and John Lee. I go, hold on. If we're going to cut $150 million from the police department, and I truly believe in investing more in mental health services, but that's the county's responsibility. When you call 911, you want the police to show up in a timely manner. And when you remove those services and you remove those dollars, expect higher increased response times. Expect a cut in police services. So, in the words of Eric Adams, if a police officer can be elected to a big city, you look at Eric Adams, he says it best, and I agree with him. You can have justice and safety at the same time. You can have justice and safety at the same time. And that's the mayor that I'm going to be, making sure that our officers are supported, make sure the officers are beloved and supported and respected, But my message to LAPD is this. I want you to be the officer that I was on the streets. Show the heart behind the badge. Have that guardian mentality. Arrest the bad guys, yes, who are preying on the most vulnerable. But the moment you tarnish the badge, you will be held accountable. And I know the rank and file agree with me.
Well, it's interesting. We live in an era, for better and worse, of sound bites. But it sounds like, from your perspective, neither defund the police or lock them up and throw away the key
Right.
is the right answer.
And going back to UCLA Luskin School, they did a survey. We modeled in Watts, the Community Safety Partnership Program, that now has gone citywide. We embraced it because we knew with relationship-based policing, you see a reduction in violent crime, which we see in Watts. That's why it's now gone citywide. So you hear my opponents when asked what their public safety plan, they're going to say expand community safety partnership. Well, welcome to the dance, because we know it works. We modeled it. But at the same time, the community in Watts, they want to feel safe. But with that model, they are comfortable coming to the officers there and saying, this guy is causing havoc and he needs to be addressed. Go Rams, right? If you look at the Watts Rams today, these are police officers who are coaching our kids in Watts. In fact, 17 of them went to the Super Bowl with our coaches at LAPD. That is the model to follow, and that's the police officer that I was, and that's the police department that I expect and demand when I'm mayor.
Okay, so I would, left to my own devices, ask another 15 or 20 follow-up questions just on that one topic.
Sure, I know, I'm sure.
But we do need to move on, and I do want to talk about homelessness.
Yeah.
But I would say this before we even get into the details of the issue, Joe. I think you'd agree that one of the things that makes so many voters in Los Angeles and elsewhere so skeptical about politicians is many, present company accepted, will promise us the world, and we never know whose promises are the ones we ought to believe or not. Yeah. So if you'd be willing to indulge us, before you tell us about your plan for dealing with homelessness in Los Angeles, can you tell us a little bit about your history on the issue? Yeah. And then we can move past into the future.
That. Going back to when I was a police officer, again, showing the heart behind the badge, you don't know how many people then that I connected people to services, those who were suffering from drug addiction, alcohol abuse, living on the streets, connecting them with Harbor Interfaith, a great relationship that I had when I was a senior lead officer. It's, fast forward to today, it's increased threefold from what I experienced. But I also felt as a police officer, I did not have the proper tools in training to address people who were struggling with mental illness on the street. And unfortunately, in order for me to put them on a 72-hour hold, I had to put handcuffs on them. That's wrong. That was wrong. Officers are not behavioral health professionals. I think they are. We're everything, right? But, they're not trained to deal with someone who is suffering from psychosis out in the streets. So I learned that, and in my decision-making as a council member, I've also realized that there are criminal elements attached to the homeless issue in Los Angeles. Let's be honest with ourselves. It's not a crime to be homeless. But we do know that there's gangs who are demanding rent from the homeless to take up a piece of sidewalk. We do know that there's drug dealers who are preying on the most vulnerable in these encampments. We know that there's sex trafficking in these encampments. And that has been the experience and my observation as a local leader sitting on that council. My colleagues may not have agreed with me on what's really happening on the ground. And that's the the experience that I bring in this position as mayor, is knowing what's happening outside this very moment and not needing a poll to tell me, not needing a task force, not needing a report back on what's happening on the street.
So the LA Times reported a week or two ago a fairly startling survey, I thought.
Yeah.
that showed far beyond what Angelenos thought should be done to address the homeless problem. What leapt out to me was how hopeless a majority of the residents of our city felt about the scope of the challenge and the prospects of overcoming it. Given what we see on our streets every day, why should we, as the people of Los Angeles, not feel hopeless about this challenge, about this crisis?
Well, 1,300 souls die a year. Over half of the fires that the fire department respond to are encampment related. People suffering from mental illness are not in the right mind frame to say yes to help. I saw this as a street police officer. I've experienced this and seen this firsthand by visiting encampments and talking to people as a council member. And then you have money being spent. You have the governance structure of the LA Homelessness Services Authority called LAHSA. That's top heavy. That's paying executives a ton of money while people are dying in our streets. That's why I'm calling to end LAHSA. $330 million we're giving to them every year. We can do a lot with those dollars on outreach. When you have a city that promised its voters, we're going to build 10,000 units with Measure HHH, and we're barely even making a dent, of course there's skepticism. This is why, as a council member, I warned my colleagues years ago that as a police officer, we're not treating this homelessness crisis the FEMA-like response that it deserves. And you can go back to the Daily News. I inked an op-ed piece asking the governor to call for a state of emergency. That went on deaf ears. You can see what I've done on mental illness, asking the intervention for the state government to reform the mental health rules, to redefine gravely disabled, to seek higher numbers of conservatorship, because people are dying in our streets. You can see the actions that I took, that we said yes to interim emergency housing, and we have housed half of the people living on our streets in my district. You're not going to find that anywhere in the city, because we came at this with a different approach, to the point where we've housed those who are struggling on the street, and we need to take this same model citywide. So go to saferstreets.la, that's the commercial, and we'll talk more about that, because since my colleagues have not agreed with me, I'm going to take it to the people, to the voters, to treat this as the FEMA-like response that it deserves.
Again, so many other questions to be asked on this issue, and in just a few minutes, I'm going to be very eager to hear several of our audience questions that the amazing Michelle Stoll has. But before we get to that, no surprise, you're not the only candidate talking about these issues.
Right.
Crime and homelessness are issues that most, if not all of the candidates for mayor are talking about. And in the last several days, we've had a fairly noticeable new entry to the race. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk, and please feel free to address the rest of the field as well. But Mr. Caruso's entry into the race, and the fact that he, like you, seems to be staking out a more aggressive position on the issues of crime and homelessness.
I wouldn't say aggressive, Dan. I would say it's more balanced.
Balanced, fair enough. A more balanced approach on these issues.
Thank you for agreeing with me, Rick.
Up until recently, it seemed like you had that more balanced lane.
Sure.
Pretty much to yourself.
Yep.
And now we're hearing a lot of the same types of things from him. And I don't know much about your personal finances, but I'm guessing that his are just the slightest
I'm
bit
no
more.
billionaire, I can tell you that. Just ask mom and dad.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's another candidate in the race with 4.3 billion reasons to be heard on these issues. How do you differentiate yourself from Rick Russo and from the other candidates in the race on these issues, not just on your positioning, but when those differences aren't as apparent to the electorate?
Well, there's, in the mayoral election, I don't know, Dan, you've been doing this for a while. have you seen the stark differences in candidates in the mayoral election here in LA? I'm interviewing now, now, but I mean, we haven't seen the stark differences. And here's the thing. You know, Rick, civic-minded, civic leader, invested in Los Angeles. Karen, Kevin, Mike, respected leaders. It's just a different lived experience and a different mindset, right? You know, I'm going to share the story. My dad calls me in his thick Italian accent on Saturday morning. Joe, you heard Rick Russo is running. I go, yeah, Dad, it's on. Let's win this. He goes, money cannot buy people. He's an Italian immigrant, 77 years old, God bless him. So there's money involved here. But I ask you, the audience, and voters, the difference between myself and the other candidates is what I just shared with you. I've given 30 years of my life working the streets of Los Angeles. I'm not an ideologue here. I know the issues you're facing because I've seen it firsthand. I've patrolled these streets. I've worked the parks. And we've made effective change based on our decision making and our quick decision making. Some of my opponents, they can't make up their mind, or they want to look at the root cause of homelessness. The root cause of homelessness. We're beyond that. People are dying in our streets. Let's fix it. I've been in the business of figuring things out, responding code 3, lights and siren to these crises, and fixing it and getting it done. So I also asked, what have the opponents done? How many people have they housed? What's their stance on public safety? What have you done? I'm tired of these words. In fact, I respectfully, 3 of the top tier candidates have been in office for decades. Positions of leadership at the state and federal level. They should have solved the mental health crisis and homelessness while they're in positions of leadership. Guys, the only elected office I've ever held in my life was senior class president at San Pedro High School. Now, that is a difference. It's experience and having the ability to get things done and not talking about it.
Okay, last question for me before we go to audience questions then, just to follow up on that.
Yeah.
Because you're right, in a mayoral campaign in a city like Los Angeles, the policy differences aren't always all that apparent, which gets to a broader question of leadership.
Yeah.
The thing I love most about Los Angeles, and I know you feel the same way, and I'm guessing that almost all of you do as well, is we are the most extraordinary experiment in diversity in the history of the human race. This is the most diverse community that has ever been seen on the planet Earth. And it is an experiment. But with that diversity, Joe, comes challenges. How do you, as one of 5 top tier and one of many candidates for mayor, how do you unite that city? How do you get all of us from different backgrounds, different perspectives, different goals? How do you get us to come together to take on these challenges as a leader?
Again, I go back to my upbringing, guys. I go back to mom and dad. I didn't think I was going to talk about you a lot tonight. But our home welcomed everyone. Regardless of how you prayed, how you loved, what you looked like, how much money you have in your pocket. My mom and dad, we were like the epicenter of just events and celebrations. And that's Los Angeles. That's the home that I know and love. LA is the home that welcomes everyone as it welcomed my immigrant parents. And this story is no different than what you hear in Boyle Heights. This story is no different than what you hear in South Los Angeles, on the west side, in Sylmar, in Wilmington. That's our story. And I, as mayor, based on my upbringing, that's how I unite the city based on my experiences living in a household that welcomed everyone.
Well, like I said, I could keep all of you here until breakfast with follow-up questions, but we are long past time to get to much smarter and much more intelligent questions from our very smart and intelligent audience, asked by the very smart and intelligent and amazing Michelle Stoll. So before Michelle gets to ask the first question, you all gave a very, very generous round of applause to the whole team at IBEL and at the LA World Affairs Council Town Hall. But the one person who more than any other has been the architect of tonight's program has been Michelle Stoll. So please give her a round of applause because she really deserves it.
Okay, Kim, I did not pay him to say that, but thank you. Yay. All right, are you ready, Joe? We have some good questions.
Okay.
So this is from Doug S. He says, you argue for local policing methodologies using yourself as an example. However, the California Constitution bars residency requirements. Are you for residency requirements for cops?
I think, as far as residency, in order to apply, you have to be a resident of LA. I don't know, Doug's. Yeah, so I think what we have found is we need more people who live in Los Angeles to be our police officers. I mean, that's why I joined. We also need to realize as we're recruiting, I want our officers to recruit the men and women who are there are mentoring, who live in Los Angeles. That's community policing at its finest. So the question is I would continue to support that, absolutely. Doug?
Did we do well by your question? Did we get it answered? All right.
Okay.
Let's move on to the second question. This is from Alex. How can we be assured that citizens have access to you on key issues? I'm assuming once you become elected.
Yeah, it's no different than how I've been a council member for these past 10 years. It's, again, I have led on the ground. You're going to see me in neighborhoods. You're going to have access to me and my staff. City Hall, I have found, well, of course, these last couple of years have not been welcoming due to COVID. But I have, as mayor, will have an awesome responsibility to put residents in place to serve on commissions. And if you look at the history of commissioners come with, they give hefty donations. And I'm going to pick folks like you, folks like me, ordinary folks who understand and have a love for the city and want to serve on these specific commissions.
Michelle, if I may, before you go
Yes.
on, I am not taking sides in this race at all, but I just want to add one thing to Joe's answer because I had the privilege of talking with a few of his senior staff members before the program started tonight, and not to get them in trouble, but they were complaining because their candidate will talk to absolutely anybody for as long as he possibly can, no matter what else they put on his schedule.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, again, it goes back, if I can, Dan, is being the senior lead officer. I pick up the phone. People have my cell number. And that's not going to change. That is not going to change. They get upset at me. They say, why are you giving your cell phone out? Going back to how I serve, right? And the guilt that I have when I don't call someone back, when I don't respond to an email. In fact, we have a great relationship with folks in Los Feliz. Dennis did a bad job of forwarding me an email from Stephen McCarthy. And I've built a relationship with Steve for these last few years. Actually, I went out to his neighborhood, even before I was thinking about running for mayor, because I felt bad that he was suffering. There was a gang that was taking over his neighborhood. And that is a different type of leadership that you'll see from me compared to the other candidates.
All right, this is my favorite question.
Okay.
This is from Michael. What ideas do you have for traffic mitigation in Los Angeles?
Yes. We have a traffic problem here. I've always been a fan of reversible lanes. We know during peak hours, a lot of traffic going into downtown. Why aren't all the lights green going eastbound? Reversible lanes. I think it's thinking outside the box as well. We have never tried this, but we need more reversible lanes during peak hours to get people in and out. I'll continue to support the expansion of our light rail, support the subway, the above-ground subway on the 405 to connect people from the valley to the airport to SoFi Stadium. I've always been supportive of multimodal communities, and we've said yes to innovation. I got in trouble for bringing line bikes because I couldn't wait any longer for DOT to approve a pilot program. So I said, just do it. Let's launch. And we did it in Watts, where we launched that. So, multimodal communities are successful communities. And as it relates to economic development, our ultimate goal is to create these commercial centers like we did in my district in San Pedro, where you have a workforce, you have amenities, you have restaurants, so you don't have to drive downtown LA to get in the car. So we'll continue to do that as mayor.
All right, this is our last question.
Okay?
This is from the Consul General of Israel.
Hello.
They would like to ask, which fields of innovation would you like to promote for the city of LA?
2 words: bring it. Any and all innovation that's going to improve our quality of life. And our friends in Israel have been in the forefront of innovation as it relates to the environment, traffic, security. Listen, if I would like to look at innovation that surrounds public safety. And I can tell you firsthand, God bless our police officers, that they cannot be on every street corner 24/7. I'd like to bring technology to deter crime, bring in technology that would make it easier to arrest offenders who are preying on the most vulnerable. So looking forward to working with you. Hello.
Michelle, if I may, I know we're
Sure.
a minute or 2 over, but we did start a little bit late.
Yep.
If I can take moderator's prerogative to ask
You
one
can.
final question.
Absolutely.
And
Thanks, Michelle.
You're welcome.
this is a more personal one.
Yeah.
You've got a couple of great kids. You have an amazing family. And by the way, I want to hear your father imitate your accent. And all in all, it sounds like a great life. And running for mayor and serving as mayor is a 24/7 job. And it doesn't eliminate all those other wonderful things in life, but it certainly limits the amount of time that you can spend
Yeah.
on them. Probably not nearly as much time as you would want.
What
Why?
are you thinking?
Yeah, all right.
Why are you doing this?
You know what? I was going to ask the question more politely, but I will ask it that way. What are you thinking? Why are you putting yourself through this?
Yeah. I'll tell you a personal story. I know I'm supposed to be with Gia at dance tonight. And my first role is to be a loving and supportive husband and father. And this is something that my parents taught me, and my team knows as well. But it takes a lot. It's demanding. Life of public service is demanding. My wife is no different. Her love of public service as an educator. She was in South LA the other night dealing with a couple administrators from an RV fire next to a school. This has been in our blood and our DNA. But I can tell you, between Jay and I, we love this city. When my wife turns to me, and you've heard the same story elsewhere, and she says, "Joe, I think we should consider leaving the city," because she's afraid of her well-being. That broke my heart. Why should we leave? Our parents, she's a daughter of Italian immigrants. Our parents came here with nothing. Let's make it better. She goes, run for mayor. Only you can fix it. I go, yes, ma'am. So I got the blessing. It was kind of like a Rocky Balboa moment, you know, when Adrian goes to win, Rocky, win. But going back, it's like we've dedicated our lives to public safety. Her in the classroom, me as on the street as a police officer, even more so as a council member, now mayor. But it's worth it. It's worth it, Dan. It's worth it because the direction of the city, we need to pivot, because I hope and pray, well, you know, my son's in college. I want him to come back and live in L.A. My daughter's a freshman in high school. She's going to do well in high school. She can go off to college. I want them to come. My nieces and nephew, guys, my whole family lives here. The decisions that I make, I'm going to be thinking of my nieces and nephew who are in 2nd, 3rd, 8th grade. Because the decisions that I'm going to make are going to impact those, my nieces and nephews, my kids, like your kids and your family members.
Well, thank you, Joe. And I'm going to turn this back over to Michelle, but before I do, because I know she has a number of thanks to offer, I want to make sure that I take a moment to thank all of you. Because as we talked about, as I mentioned at the beginning of the program, here we are roughly 4 months from a primary, 9 months from a general election. By late October, early November, there will be thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people clamoring for attention to hear just a little snippet from a candidate. But the way a campaign happens, the way democracy works, is when those first concentric circles of civic leaders and community influencers like all of you come together for programs like this one.
Yeah.
And go home and tell your friends and your neighbors and family members about what you heard, what you liked, what you didn't like, and let that and take that message forward, verbally, online, however you can. Because when democracy works, whether it's in a mayoral election or a presidential election, it's not just for the candidates themselves. Politics is too important to be left to the politicians. And for each one of you to remind your friends and neighbors and members of your community why these conversations is so important. That's what's going to make the election work the way it should. It's what's going to make democracy work the way it should. It's what's going to make Los Angeles to work the way it should. So give yourselves a round of applause. Yes. We're glad you're here.
I want to, if I can quickly, give Dan a shout out as well for your commitment to civic engagement, to politics. And I have 3 of my staff who come from the Dan Schnur School of Politics. And you put out amazing talent coming out of your shop. So thank you. I got the best team. And by the way, you should know that 98% of my team have been with me since day one. I owe a debt of gratitude to this group here. They were amazing.
We're both going to get in trouble if we don't turn this over to Michelle.
No, I'm loving this. Joe, you were a fabulous kickoff to our mayoral series. We're so grateful to you and your team. It's been a pleasure working with you. Thank you so much, Dan, for everything you do. And the fabulous compliment. I just want to keep you with me all the time. I'd like to tell you, of course, we want to thank everyone for attending, coming out in the cold, and I hear it was hailing in Redondo Beach, and I don't even know what's going on outside, but thank you so much for coming. A huge thanks once again to the fabulous staff of the Abel of Los Angeles for putting this all together. They're an incredible team. And we want to tell you, speaking of getting involved, please join us for part 2 of our mayoral series on March 15th when we host candidate Mike Fuhrer. And we have an exciting program coming up. Don't forget to register. Look at our website for our live stream on March 3rd with Mayor Garcetti. And he's going to be talking to Dan about the challenges facing the new mayor. So we're excited about that. So we can't wait to see you next month. Please come back. I mean, if you can come out in this cold weather and with the rain and hail, come on back on March 15th. We'd love to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. That was great.